Welcome to another episode of GM Tips. GM Rick here. I hope everybody's having a great week of gaming. And I'm going to continue on my themes of different types of terrain campaigns, where you set a campaign based in the type of terrain that you want to be in. In this case, as promised, we're going to talk about the Underdark or the Darklands, whichever one you want to kind of call them. These are basically adventures that are based underground. And so, Fantasy Campaign has really capitalized on those. So your Dungeons and Dragons, your Pathfinder, your Dungeon World, your 13th Age, a lot of the ones that are more what I call like that open legend RPG, they really take a lot of time to focus in on the Underdark. And why is that? Well, one of the most iconic races of all time comes from the Underdark, and that is the Drow, or Drow if you want to pronounce it that way. However you want to pronounce it. It's Drow, I do believe. And so I'll stick with that, and that's what I'm going to stick with. But there's just so much intrigue with the Underdark. In fact, Critical Role just finished up a while ago in their early episodes being in an Underdark adventure, where things were underground. They were dealing with Duergar, the Dark Shroud, Darrow, and Illithids, the Mind Flayers. There's just so much intrigue with being underground. There's hidden civilizations, lost empires, wicked arts going on, wicked rituals, just capitals, whole capitals and citadels, basically put in the darkness of the Underdark. Now, again, in some cases you have the phosphorus lichens that will allow you to see more of what is under there, but these are whole races that are living in the underground. And so, why is there a draw to it? Well, I think because it is a terrain that is often unexplored. Now, a lot of GMs and DMs are moving to it more, I think, because they like the idea of an underground campaign. Now, you can do it also in modern. You can do it in what I call 1800 steampunk. And you can also do it in your sci-fi campaigns. Though, again, not that sci-fi campaigns, I've envisioned it a lot like the Time Machine with the Morlocks and other underground races, maybe a serpentoid race or a dark race or like the Sagothi, a worm race. And there's a lot of intrigue there. And again, maybe a civilization was driven underground because of a nuclear holocaust or war or an asteroid hit on their planet. And that's what draws you in on the sci-fi aspect of it. So keep in mind, depending on the genre you want to do, there's a lot that can be done there. Now, 1800s, what would you do with that? You could do underground sewer adventures that then go down into maybe a city that was built on by the current city. So there was a lot lost, and there's people that have gone down there and dwelled, and creatures that have risen up from that. Almost a Cthulhu-esque type of setting that comes up from that. And it's the same thing with the modern, with the supervillains. You could have almost a Cthulhu-esque type of cult, or a Hydra, or an AIM that is underground that is trying to do that. So I say that because there's just every genre can have their adventures there and do a lot with it. I love it because there's just so much that you can really work with. For instance, if you're doing a Deadlands Reloaded, you could do the Anasazi, and the Anasazi were cliff-dwelling races that basically built in caves and other places to be out of sight of the white man and other dangers. So the Anasazi can be very much a part of that and part of the evils in the Deadlands. And maybe it's a lost Anasazi spirit that has come back, or a Wendigo that is driving people crazy, and it's all rooted in an underground cave-like area. So keep in mind, you can do this no matter what genre you're playing. You can base whole campaigns around it. You can put a city that's near the Underdark, an outpost city or something like that. So again, this is kind of the idea that whets the appetite. What I'm going to go forward with here is a little bit more into the fantasy side of things. I know I do that a lot, and some of you guys probably go nuttier than fruitcake, but keep in mind, fantasy creatures can also be incorporated into modern, like the 1800s Deadlands Reloaded. It can be put into 1300s piracy or other type of adventures. It can be put into steampunk Westward Bound and from Pure Steam and the continent there, or it can be put into some other type of futuresque one, like a Numenera, where maybe there's some lost and hidden fallen civilizations that were there before, or a post-Holocaust, so like a zombie survivor or a nuke survivor Holocaust. You can do all these there too. So keep in mind, these monsters can be the results of mutations and other things. We were watching, my fiance and I, Shannara, the Shannara Chronicles, and I forgot about Terry Brooks and what he had written, and how the races came about from the wars that our cultures had. And most of this was based in like Oregon and Washington State, and what were the survivor realms of Shannara. So keep in mind, you can do these type of things for other campaigns. You can incorporate the races. You can bring other things in. There's all kinds of ways that you can incorporate. It's just a matter of what do you want to do with it. So there, I'm going to switch gears a little bit. Then we're going to talk about the specifics of what is in the Underdark. What kind of hazards are there as a GM? And I think you got to keep that in mind, that when you go into there, and that's one of the things I really love about the Darklands, and one of the things they did is that Paizo put the different layers of the Darklands. So you can see where the entrances are to the Darklands on the world of the Inner Sea, as well as major landmarks that are down there. Now, what are some of the hazards? And I think you've got to look at the hazards of being underground. What can happen? Number one is travel and safety. You're traveling in caverns. Now, often they're dark, they're dank, they haven't been in a long while. There is moisture and condensation that can calcify that area and make it very slick. I used to go a little bit spelunking, and I love going caving. And one of the biggest dangers is the wetness, the moisture that's in some of these areas. Now, not every area is that way. Desert areas are not. But in the normal lush areas, those cave areas are very wet and slick and slippery. So traveling in them is a hazard. As a GM, you may incorporate a lot of skill checks with that, but that can be one of the many hazards. Hitting dead ends, complexity. How do you map it? How do you not get lost? Again, we take for granted and just assume our players are going to find their way back. In the Underdark, that's not the case. They need to make survival checks. And even in more modern campaigns, if you've got a survival skill, when you're underground, unless you've got some sort of equipment that allows you to track and map, you're not going to easily map something and not get lost. And even if you put chalk marks and everything else, who knows what can come along and get rid of those behind you. So keep that in mind. Primary movement is only going to be about 3/4 speed through a normal tunnel. You're not going to go fast. There's too many rocks, too many hazards, too many slick points, too many crumbly areas, just too much danger. There are whole sinkholes that you can walk over an area and an area can collapse. So keep that in mind. There's a lot of dangers. Secondary tunnels. Again, you're only going to go about 1/4 of your movement speed. Why is that? These are smaller. They are more confined. There are more dangers involved in them. They're not well traveled. You don't know what you're going to find in there. So you're much more cautious as you go forward and proceed, I hope, as a party. Tertiary tunnels, you need about a 1/10 movement speed. Now, how about the survival skills and negotiating? Well, what Paizo recommends, and you can put this into D&D, you can do this into any of your other systems, GURPS. I'm going to mention them all. Deadlands, you just have to convert them to the roles and the type of danger survival type of things. So the DC roll that they recommend for safety is a 20, with perils being the complexity of the perils to map and kind of go with it is about a DC 5 on your survival skills. Now, in tertiary tunnels, it's a 20 for the safety and a 15 for the complexity with a DC 5 to map. You can automatically map in the primaries. The secondary is a little tougher. Tertiaries, it's really tough. You're talking a survival of 30. You're talking about a complexity survival of 30 and a 15 to map. So keep in mind, these are saying that as you get into these weird places, it's much more difficult. Maybe there's water. They're partially submerged. You're not going to have an easy time navigating and negotiating. And I know it from experience. When we went in scouts, I used to do a lot of tunnel and underground things. And it's true. Your heroes don't move as quickly as you think they will. We had to, as scouts, move ahead with a stick to make sure in the flooded caves that we didn't catch a sinkhole and fall through. Because if you fell through that sinkhole, you're in the dark, there's no air pocket, you don't breathe, you die. That's what happens. They're dangerous. Keep that in mind. Air, that's another thing that people run into. So you've got bad air, you've got carboxene air, which is a rare gas that can basically ignites it and causes an explosion. It's kind of like the hydrogen deposits that you find in some of those areas that build up. And there's another thing they call quick death, which is a poison gas, kind of like your, what was the gas that used to come up with, they were saying for a long time in houses, and that you had to watch out for it. Otherwise, you could die. It was a colorless, odorless gas that, if it happened, you'd end up dying. So those are all kinds of challenges that as you're going through these tunnels, you can run into. And you as a GM have to determine where are these areas. Where's there light air, bad air, no air? Because again, you're underground. Not everything is guaranteed that you're going to have a lot of oxygen. There are when you're closer to plant roots, but as you get deeper and deeper, unless there's plants to produce it, it's limited, it's stale. It's not very good to breathe long term. Tremors and collapsing tunnels are another danger down there. So you're marching along, and all of a sudden you have an earth tremor in the area, and a whole tunnel collapses or a whole tunnel shift. Or, you have just collapsing because it's over time, the area erodes. Maybe it gets a lot of moisture, and it becomes very muddy, and then it falls in. Or maybe somebody put a trap there to make it that way. So, these are all kind of things that you got to watch out for when you're down there in those areas. So keep that in mind. Now, if you haven't got this, either get the version of it in your system. So, like, if there's a Drow of the Underdark, get that for your D&D. People with 13th Age and Dungeon World, you can convert a lot of these. GURPS, you can too. They're just great source guides of information of what's down there. Now, the creatures are different. In this one, they don't have ropers as much. They don't have Illithids. They do have intellect devourers. There's certain creatures that aren't in each one's system, so I'm not going to go heavily into those. I'm going to pick more common races. For the modern ones, you can use this. D20 Modern or any of these D20-based systems that are modern, you can absolutely use this material. So a guide like this isn't a bad thing to have. Okay, so maybe you don't use the maps. Maybe you don't use the other things. You can just simply use the information on the deadly type of things you can run into. Darkness. Unless you've got dark vision, low light vision doesn't work too well in the Underdark. It just gets darker and darker, and then you really don't see. And then those of you that don't have dark vision or low light vision, you're screwed. Okay, you need torches and light sources, and guess what? That's a little flaming beacon that says, "Come and eat me." So it's very dangerous. There's different funguses and molds. You notice there was a lot of mold creatures, myconids and fungi and shriekers and other types of molds that can kill you. And here they have Cytelish, which is kind of a psychedelic drug mold. You've got ghost mold. You've got things like lava flow. So you could be down there and you have a lava flow breakthrough. Some scary stuff. There are different types of poisons down there. So they have like Haphorite, which is the Drow stone, and it's used to transmute people, so for flesh warping. So some of these things may warp your flesh or mutate you. Blightburn, it's lethal. It's basically radiation almost. It blisters your skin. It causes some deadly things, and over time, you basically, this radiation deals with you, and you die as if you were hit by a side effect of a nuclear blast. Lazurite, also radioactive, and in fact, it raises a lot of dead creatures. So, they often have these kind of things to turn things. The water, flash flooding, partial water, underground cavern chambers that you can fall into. So all these are things that are dangerous, not even counting monsters. These are just the simple dangers of the natural elements that can kill you in the Underdark. And think about it, even under our Earth, there is radiation, there's other deposits, where you run into a uranium deposit or something else, and holy crap, you're in trouble. Your hair falls out, your teeth fall out, you got bloody gums. It is not pleasant. So keep that in mind, that when players play in an Underdark campaign, unless they're born there and know those dangers exist, if they're going down to explore for a whole campaign, it's dangerous. You don't know this land. It is something far deeper. Unless you have a dwarf in your party that's like second or third generation, I came out of the earth, or a sphere of Nebly gnome, or maybe one of the bug folk, or something else that is a non-Drow-esque creature, you're in trouble. Now, what else is there? Dark gods. The Cthulhu-esque gods love to dwell in the darkness. So, in a lot of these Underdark realms, the farther down you get, like in this one in Pathfinder with Orb, the crazier it gets. There are more of the what they call the Sagothi and other worm type of folk and weird creatures that are down in the Orb level, the real deep dark. And a lot of those are Cthulhu-esque realms where the followers of Cthulhu and the Cthulhu mythos come out of. So you're creatures of nightmare and warped mind and insanity. And if you think about it, when you get that far into the deep and the dark, you start going insane. You hear things, you hear voices. It's just always dark, and you don't know what's coming your way. And so in those type of situations, you end up getting in trouble with those kind of things. Sorry, the cat's drinking fish water. Cassie! There we go. Sorry. Got to get the cat out of the cat water, or the fish water. So, and again, these are Sagothi, if you're wondering. The worm folks. Now, what can you play in there? Well, you've got so many different races. If you want to play something from there, you've got the Darrow. The Darrow are a little crazy and sadistic. Not everybody has to be from that race, but they tend to be. You have the Duergar. The Duergar are very, very dark dwarves that stayed behind, that were left behind, that felt when the rest of the dwarves went to the surface, they were abandoning their culture. And they stayed in the darkness and brooded. And different gods, depending on the campaign, dwarf gods committed themselves to their darkness and their nastiness. So they're a bit like the Drow in their sadism. They love slavery. Now, slavery is common in the Underdark. Get used to it. They enslave races for their pleasure, for their sport, for their foot soldiers, for their mining operations, to expand their cities. They're all about taking surface dwellers and then bending them to their will. Creatures like the Aboleth are down there. Good God. In some campaigns, those Aboleth are nasty. Really nasty. In Pathfinder, they're very nasty, because there's the Veiled Masters. Those are masters that took over whole civilizations from afar with their mind control. So keep in mind, there are lots of creatures that want to control your mind. In D&D, there's the Illithid Mind Flayers. There's the Beholders. And in Pathfinder, there's the Intellect Devourers and the Sagothi and other creatures that want to deal with your mind. There are other creatures down there, like driders and scum and troglodytes, creatures of the Cthulhu-esque type of nastiness. Now, with the driders, it's kind of interesting how each one comes about in each realm, but they are basically the tortured of the world. So again, Narvoth, really nice place. And then as you get down into the lower layer of Sekamina, you get to the Drow. I love the Drow. Differences between D&D and Pathfinder, who they worship. Loth is very much an iconic one of D&D and their realms. In this one, there are many demon lords and lordesses that in Pathfinder, and there's the ghouls that are down there too. Keep in mind the ghouls like to be in the really nasties, and of course, Orv, deep Orv. What kind of adventures? You can be of a Drow patronage, trying to take down another Drow city and become the leader of the Drow Empire. You could be a Duergar doing this. You could be the Duergar fighting a crusade against the Drow. You could be the Swear of Nebly fighting against the Drow and the Duergar. You could be a dwarven group that got lost, that is not of the dark side, but wants to go in and reclaim ancient land. You could be the elves coming in to eradicate their nasty Underdark brethren. You can be rat folk who are trying to survive in the Underdark and get around and get by and trade and not get enslaved. You could be halflings that are trying to escape an enslaving empire. You could be a race of spacefarers that come down into the Underdark to escape a cataclysmic event that's going on and didn't know all this existed down below. You could be mining for some rich ore or deposits that would help your empire or star system or starship to do better. You could be looking for lost riches. You could be looking for a lost city that has all kinds of technology and things that are just not common. These are all ideas that you can use for the Underdark. I'd say the Underdark, honestly, the things are limitless compared to the things that you come up with on the surface. And especially in the underground, there's so much more, and it's so much tougher to get to the good gods that can help you in fantasy. And in space, you don't know what's down there. You don't know what's worshipped, and you may worship nothing or have agnosticism and find out about the Cthulhu deities and how nasty they really are. Who knows what you will find when you go into the dark? The great part about it is it makes for epic adventures that no one will ever forget. I know it's a snapshot. I'm trying to keep it to 24 minutes on most of these or less because there just is so much material. Get your resources. Get them and study them. Become an expert in the Underdark. Because really, that's what's going to set it apart. And no two adventures are the same. No two campaigns are the same. And for instance, there are paths that are set up. If you want to convert a path, the Second Darkness is one that was done for Pathfinder in Varissia. And you can convert that to whatever world. You can put it onto Faerun. You can put it into Greyhawk. You can put it into, Numenera. You can do a lot of different things. The 9 realms, you could put it in there as one of the lost realms, the 10th realm that was not known. That was the Underdark realm. And you're trying to stop them from destroying the world this time around again. And instead of the basic weapons and some of the odd things, convert the spells over and some of the other items. There's so much you can do with these things, guys and ladies. And just keep that in mind. I really appreciate the time. It's 24 minutes, just a little bit over. Appreciate your watching, and I hope you have a great time in the Underdark.